I have been on a roll with my scrap pile and finishing up quilts and getting things completed, and I'm ready for the holiday season. I'm getting ready to get some more fabrics on hand and get some pretty Christmas prints in, but I've got to clear out what I have first, and that's what I've been working on for the past month or so. And I have some more ideas for you, some scrappy quilt ideas that you can use with charm squares. I have a lot of charm squares I need to get rid of, and it is time to use them up. I'm Leah Louise from Inspired Quilting by Leah Louise, and I want to share some of the ideas that I came up with, plus some ideas that I found out on the internet that are pretty amazing. There's a lot going on with log cabins and charm squares that we can learn from, and I want to share that with you today. But before we get started, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe so we can continue sharing these great ideas and having some fun quilting time together. And for now, let's go ahead and get started on quilting. I'm anxious to show this to you. All right, now the most easy way to make a charm square log cabin is sort of what I call the traditional charm log. And what we do is we take a charm square, a 5-inch block, and whether you buy them as a charm pack or cut your own, I cut most of my own simply because I buy fat quarters, so I always have extra fabric, and charm squares come in so handy for so much. So here are a couple different ones that I've cut, and these are going to be my center block. So let's take one of these and one of these, and we'll see what we can come up with. Now, the second thing is you're going to take your charm square like this, and you want 4 layers. You want 4 different fabrics. And you want to trim them to 1.5 inches each. So we get 1 and 2 and 3. And I always do at least 4 different fabrics, so I have a different one for each side. So at this point, I have my 2 squares, I have my long pieces, but I need some short side pieces for my first rails, because one way to make this is with the, what do they call it, the town square steps, or the stair steps where there are 2 on the same side. So instead of making your block go around, you do side and then side, side and side. So let me show you that real quick. But what you have to do is take one of these strips and cut it in half. So here's what I did, and that's 5 inches, so cut in half, that's 2.5. So that's going to fit right here. And then I'm going to put something else on the top and on the bottom. So there's one. Now, there's not as much contrast as I would like. Let's see, let's put this one in the middle here. Oh, that's right, well, we're going over here. Oh, well, that's redundant. That's okay. You know, I like contrast. So I'm going to go here, and let me take one of these. Do I have a small one in a different color? I think I used them both here. So let's do this. Let's put this there. There we go. So now I'm going to use this one here. Then I'll take this one and go the full length. And I will take, let's see, what else do I have here? I've used most of these. Oh, haven't used this one yet. So let's use this very dark one. This one here goes from here to here like that. And then this one will go across the top. And this will finish at 5 inches. So this way it's just a matter of which way you prefer using it. If you do this, you make your center piece and then you add 2 strips. Whereas this one, you cut your center, you start with the smallest, and then you just work your way around. And you're going to end up with smaller pieces here, which is why this may be the more commonly used. But I can use a 1.5 inch square pretty easily. I have hopes of a postage stamp quilt someday, and we'll talk about that later. But this is your charm square. This is how to make a charm square log cabin. These are 2 different ways that you can do it. Now, I also want to show you how you can do it in another way, which is a bit quicker. Now, here's another way to use charm squares for a log cabin. And I think this makes it a bit quicker. The other one is perfect if you just want to use 2 charm squares for each of your blocks, and go for contrast, and one be particularly light and the other dark, and then mix that throughout your quilt like in a checkerboard style. Here's another way that I think would be fun, is cutting one charm square in half. So we have 2 2.5-inch pieces around our 5-inch. And then we go ahead and add some colors. Now, these are just the first things that I grabbed off the top of the pile, and they work out pretty good color-wise. So actually I'm going to make this one a little bit lighter. This has a bit brighter, lighter colors, which I think will work with these near solids. So then what I would do is we'll sew this together, then we'll sew these seams, then we're going to cut this into a 4-patch. So let me show you how that's going to work. And here's the block. So we've got a 5-inch here. We cut a charm in half and put one on each side. These are 2.5-inch strips. And then I used a 9-inch by 2.5. Now, what I'm going to show you is how to cut this. And there's nothing fancy about it. This measures 9 inches, so we're going to cut it at 4.5 inches. And I'll just put it right on my grid, and we'll go by that. But I also want to show you is how you can do this completely with charm squares, rather than adding the longer strips. Okay, so here we are. We're going to go 4.5 right there. Got a nick in my ruler. I thought I filed that down. Okay, and then this one is also going to be at 4.5. So what I'm doing is cutting this into 4 individual squares. And we can use this to create a larger log cabin block. So we would just, take some pieces like this, or we can take some smaller ones. Now, what you can decide is whether you want to use the wide ones around. Let me show you. I think I have, here we go. So if we do this, let's go this way just so they're not exactly the same. And I realize I'm not doing the traditional light and dark. I'm just sort of putting blocks together just to show you how this can work. So here's my center. This is the piece that I cut out right here like that. Then I can put another 5-inch here and a 5-inch here, but I have this empty block. Well, you can just come in with another 2.5-inch and you can create a log cabin with a diagonal pattern going through it, which is kind of fun. So there's a lot that you can do, and charm squares, because they're 5 inches, don't lend themselves to larger blocks unless you piece them together. And you could certainly take 2 5-inch pieces. I don't know if I have another wide one here of the same. And, just join them and butt them together like this and piece that across the middle. And it's just going to add a little more to the design of your log cabin, creating a bit more interest. But like I said, I think what I like is coming in and putting in another corner block, essentially doing cornerstones in here. And it's a fun way. And so you're using your 5 inches here and here. You're using your 5 inches by cutting them down into 4 pieces per charm, which gives you the 2.5-inch square. And that works out beautifully. Now, this piece alone measures 4.5 inches. And so there's a lot, like I said, you can do with this. You can also choose to do what do they call the diamonds that, or excuse me, it's like a diamond log cabin where you just do the corners. I think it's called a half log cabin. So you take a block like this. Let's use this one. I like this better. And here's our corner. This is our inside. So we're going to put a piece here and a piece here. But again, because these are only 5 inches, we need to put something up here. And so we just grab another 2.5-inch square. And so you are going to have this, you know, it'll probably be every other row. At this point, it'll probably be every row. And then do the same down here when you do it. You're going to have this piece, and then you'll have another charm, and then you put that around, and it just builds on itself. And you can decide, you know, how you want to do that. And if you look up like the half log cabin, this makes a really fun quilt, and then you can sash around it and make a block, and it's just something different that you can do. And it's easy because you're using precuts, you're using leftover fabrics, and all kinds of you know, fun things like that. So after working with the charm squares and creating some different log cabin beginnings, basically, some layouts, some ideas, things like that, I went online to search for some other ideas and see what's out there and what other folks are doing with charm squares in terms of log cabins, because it's such a great way to use scrap fabric. So I have some images I want to show you. Give me just a moment and I'll get this up. What I liked about this particular quilt is the center of each block is done with a charm square, and then just randomly place various scrap fabrics. Obviously there's no specific color scheme. There's all kinds of colors. There's no light and dark. It's just a lot of fun colors mixed together. But what I think really sets this apart and makes it work so well is, do you see how every other row is offset? So we have these narrow ones on either side. And what's nice about that is these seams then are not lining up. So instead of having rows and rows of all these blocks, you sort of have this diagonal, and it just looks really nice for this. I think it helps to direct your eye away from what could otherwise be a really busy quilt. I think this worked out great. I found it on Pinterest. There was no association to it, no name or website, so I can't direct you anywhere, but I just thought this was a really fun idea. Now give me a moment. I have another one for you. Now here's one that I really like, and I love that it starts with the charm square like we did and then cut it into quarters. This is a log cabin swap done by ModaLisa.com, and she and a number of other quilters each made, I think, a dozen or so blocks like this, but they're really large. They were over 20 inches each, and then they cut each one in quarters, and they mailed them to each other. So they're sort of creating this round robin quilt along scrappy quilt, and wait till you see how this turns out. So the first thing is you make a large block, then you cut it in quarters. Like I said, you can start with charms and then just start it, you know, laying in, and they're all different widths. So it's very random. Now wait till you see this next part. So once the recipient gets the collection of the quarters on these log cabins, then they start putting them together, and how much fun is that? This would really make such a fun quilt. And I have a picture of it below, but it's not the actual, it's the digital stylized picture of what it would look like. But I think this is awesome. This is something that's going to definitely be on my list. Now let me show you the next one. And this is what a quilt with that quadrant block would look like. I'm not quite sure what to call it. I've seen this block called a half log cabin and a quarter log cabin, and this does actually make me think of, you know, it's more of a quarter, but there's yet another way that they lay these out. But I really like the haphazard way this all goes together. I like the idea too of putting sashing in here and maybe cornerstones in there just to kind of separate it a bit, because I bet this is a mighty busy quilt. But I do have another here, one moment. This one is the Hopeful Homemaker, hopefulhomemaker.com, and she did the squares by color, which is really interesting. And I think I like how this works because you wouldn't need to necessarily sash between them. The color is a nice break between each of the blocks. And it's just kind of fun. We've got red and pink up here and the purple, so it's a bit of a rainbow layout, and I think this is a lot of fun. Now, here's another one that I think is the absolute easiest of all. This is another one I found on Pinterest that isn't associated with a name or a website, so I can't give you more info, but what a fun idea, taking just the quarters and setting them so it looks, you know, essentially like you're making an on-point quilt. I can't really see, well, yeah, I guess we can see down here, so this is on point. I didn't know if it was just a diagonal shot. And so you make a few bigger squares and tuck them in the corners and do an on point. That's a lot of fun. I think this is my favorite. And the fact that there are some darker colors in these narrower strips in there, although, you know, most of these strips may be the same, I think those darker colors really bring that kind of diamond pattern. Even though it's a square, it looks like a diamond. And I like how they are spread across the quilt. And again, these are charm squares in the center. So there's a lot of fun ideas that you can do with a Scrappy Log Cabin and use charm squares. So if part of your fabric stash includes some charms, then here's some ideas for you that I think you can really enjoy and have some fun with. So go back to that scrap pile, check it out, see if you have some charm squares or other size blocks that would make great centers, large centers for your log cabins, and get out all those strips and multicolors and throw them together and see what you can come up with and make a jumbo log cabin, cut it down into quarters, and then create a totally different kind of log cabin quilt. What fun is this? They turn out beautiful, the colors are great. I'm anxious to do one myself, and I'll show it to you when I get it ready. But for now, I want to say goodbye and thank you for being here. I appreciate it. It's been fun sharing these ideas with you. And if you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm anxious to see you again soon. And in the meantime, have fun quilting.